Mr. Osman,
Yeah.
what happened to the Muslim community after Mohammed Death?
Yes. Now, as we saw, now the first years in Mecca, about 10 years in Mecca after he became, realized that he's a prophet of God. He was more spiritual and more preaching for one God and so on. Then when his wife died and he moved to Medina, it was another stage of his life. In this case, he started fighting the Meccans and the other tribes, and eventually, in fact, 2 years before he died, he managed to unify all the major tribes of Arabia under the banner of Islam. They all followed him, but as a person, as a prophet, accepting that he is the prophet of God, one God, and accepting Islam. Islam really, the message of Islam is you have to accept 5 points. One point is to to admit or to confess that God is one with no image, and that Muhammad is his prophet. The other thing is to pray 5 times a day, and then to fast the month of Ramadan, and then to give alms to the poor. And the 5th thing is to go to Mecca for Hajj if you can afford it, 1 time a year. This is the core of Islamic belief as a religion, you see. It is not true, although now it is more confused, that Islam really, that Muhammad ordered the killing of unbelievers. Those Al-Qaeda and all these people who claim that Islam ordered them to kill unbelievers come from 2 chapters of the Quran, 2 surahs of the Quran in Medina, during which time Muhammad was in daily conflict, fighting with his enemies of Quraysh, the other tribes of Mecca. And the Quran was saying, when you meet these people, the unbelievers, he called them the unbelievers, then kill them. That means in a conflict, in fighting. This was not a message of the belief of Islam to kill unbelievers. He was talking about daily events and conflict between the tribes. So it is not true, but Al-Qaeda, for instance, only rely on these 2 chapters to justify their killing. Anyhow, when Muhammad died, Banu Najjar, who now became identified as Ansar, who supported Muhammad, wanted to, their man has died. They were his cousins, his uncles. So they decide to separate and make their own community. So they met and they decided, they had a leader called Sa'd ibn Mu'az. He's an old and fragile and sick man, but they wanted to appoint him as their leader following the death of Muhammad. Now, the Meccans, who were few at the time in Medina, especially one of the friends of the Prophet called Omar, realized that this is going to be a great loss, because for the first time Muhammad managed to gather all the tribes under one banner, unify, big power. So he thought now the tribes will come back, separate, and the situation will lose. And he wanted to play a political kind of game here to keep the unity of the tribes. So he went to the gathering of the Banu Najjar, and he tried to convince them that it is not the time to separate and better keep united. And he said, you cannot have one of your people, Banu Najjar, to be the leader of the union, because Meccans are recognized as the main, masters of Arabia, so they should control the game. And while they were discussing it, he jumped over Saad ibn Muaz, the man they were trying to choose as the leader, and in fact, he killed him. The man died. This is the story we have. So in this case, and he chose Abu Bakr, who was a close friend of Muhammad, to be a caliph. This caliph situation is not a king, he's not a prophet, but you see, a caliph has two jobs at the same time. Okay. In the religious terms, he became a successor of the prophet, so he became a successor of Muhammad, so replaced Muhammad, the prophet, as he died. And on the other hand, he became the political leader of the unified tribe of Arabia. So the caliph has two jobs. So he is the one to decide on matters of religion, of faith, and also on matters of the state. And then Muhammad did not establish a state. He established a kind of a national union. The tribes became unified under one banner, you see. And the main...
So he had nothing to do with politics, Muhammad?
Muhammad had nothing to do with politics. He was offered some political position by Meccans. He refused that. He was only a messenger with the beliefs. But Omar is the political Islam, the state of the caliphate was established specifically by Omar, who wanted to take the chance of this unity to make a political state. And he made the caliphate. Now, different tribes say, we were used to pay the alms for the poor to the prophet, and he will give it to the poor. Now that he is dead, why should we give it to anybody else? But Omar and the caliph, who was the first caliph, Abu Bakr, forced them by force to pay this thing. So in this case, they turned the alms into a tax, and they formed a government, and they formed a state, and they formed an army, you see. So Omar, behind the first caliph, who is Abu Bakr, managed to form the state of Islam for the first time in Medina. And this unification process, it took about 3 years, during which time Abu Bakr died, and Omar became himself the caliph. To tell you the truth, Omar is the guy who established the state. He sent an army first to Iraq. During that,
was political, Omar.
Yeah, Omar is established a political state of Islam. Muhammad was a religious leader. Omar was the political leader. He sent his army. Now he has an army, paid army, because before that, when Muhammad wanted to go into a war, he asked different tribes who would come with me to join me, and they shared the spoils together of the fighting. But now Omar took these arms as a tax, and he made his own army, and he sent it first to Iraq. At that time, there were two major powers in the area. In Iraq, the Iranians, the Persian Sassanian Empire extended over Iraq, while in the Levant and Egypt and so on, it was the Byzantine Eastern Roman Empire in control. So when the Arabs, unified Arabs, poor and unified, and instead of fighting each other, they have to find an alternative somebody to fight, and they went first to Iraq, and they soon were able to defeat the Persians and conquer Iraq and even conquer Persia itself, and went on to the east up till Afghanistan and Pakistan, and to the borders of China in the east. And eventually they also were able to defeat the Byzantine Roman Empire, Eastern Empire in the Levant, and extended North Africa and went all the way to Morocco, and they crossed the Mediterranean to Spain, you see, in the east. It became a big empire. Eventually, obviously, after that, when the Ottomans came, they also were able to conquer Constantinople and then Eastern Europe, and extended. They were about to enter Venice. Italy. I mean, they reached the border of Italy, but they were stopped at that time. Anyhow, what I want to say, they have established now a state. To tell you the truth, the Muslims the Arabs in these states were not interested to convert people into Islam.
Why?
Because they took tax from everybody, and they took a double tax for an Muslim, two tax for an Muslim. If somebody is a Muslim, only one tax. If he is not Muslim, so they rather take the money, the tax, rather than convert. So, for instance, in Egypt, up to about 500 years ago, I mean, about say 800 years after the Islam came to Egypt, most of the Egyptians were Christians. Were not. They only adopted Christianity. The majority adopted Christianity only from the time of the Ottomans, you see, about 5 centuries ago. So anyhow, here we have something new called the Sharia.
Yes.
You see, the Sharia is the law, like Moses has a law of Moses, 10 Commandments and so on. In the Quran there is some laws, but mainly to deal with marriage and divorce and inheritance and so on. Criminal cases only have 2 or 3 points. Like if somebody kills somebody else, he has to be killed as well.
In the Quran?
Yes. And if somebody steals something, his hand should be cut off, and so on. There are only 2 or 3 kind of laws dealing with criminal activities. Regarding the cut of the hand, the Caliph Omar decided that should not be applied, and it has not been applied since that time. But for the state now ruling Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and other countries, these countries had already some laws applied before the Arabs arrived there. So they adopted some of these laws, that especially dealing with tax and so on. But with other laws, they started to have their own scholars, religious scholars, to suggest that we have to apply to have a new law, because they thought it can agree with the teaching of Islam. So when a court took an advice of a kind of a scholar, it became a law, or they call it Sharia law, the law of the state, of the Islamic State. The rulers or the judges relied on this different kind.
This started from Omar's time.
Started from Omar, yes. Yeah. And you see, after about 13 centuries, the Islamic Empire came to an end when the Ottomans were defeated in the First World War by Britain and France and so on. Russia went out of the war because of the Russian Soviet revolution, but it was then that Kemal Atatürk, a general, Turkish army general, took control, and he decided to abolish the caliphate. So for about 13 centuries, the Islamic Empire was ruled by a caliph who was the head of the religion, like the Pope of Rome, at the same time the head of the state. Is the emperor and the religious leader at the same time, and his word in both cases will be the final word. And for most of these, obviously for all these countries except Arabia, which Arabia was neglected after that. Medina and Mecca were completely neglected, and they concentrated on, because of the money. Even the capital city of the empire was not in Medina. It started with the Umayyad started in Damascus. Then with the Abbasid it turned to Baghdad, and then the Fatimid in Cairo, and the Ottomans in Turkey, in Istanbul, and the Andalusia in Spain. They were different capitals. None of them, I mean, they are no longer have their original headquarters in Arabia. Arabia was completely forgotten, and this was the state. But the state came to an end. The caliphate itself was abolished in 1924 by Kemal Ataturk. All these nations got Islam not from the Prophet but from the Caliph. In fact, they, in a way, I mean, there's a general confusion in the minds of most Muslims that Islam is both a religion and a political state, which is not the case. Muhammad never established a state. But because they took Islam from the Caliph, who was the head of the state, so they connect the political side with the religious side of the thing. Now, I mean, this is what the problem which we are facing now. It is not, I mean...
is it the political Islam connected
to
the political state?
Exactly.
Umar started it.
Exactly. The thing is, when Caliphate was abolished, I mean, some people thought they lost their identity, because without an Islamic state, they are lost. They were not, I mean, now the national state came. Egypt became Egypt, Syria became Syria, I mean, so on. The national state, I mean, they were divided into different states, and they were not. Some people, in fact, some people were happy to do that. I mean, people who followed the Western kind of example, France and Europe and so on, they wanted to establish their national state. But some people still have the dream of getting back the caliphate. You see, one of them is called Hassan al-Banna. Hassan al-Banna was an Egyptian who lived in the early, I mean, he came out in 1928, 4 years after the caliphate was abolished, and he made an organization called the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. The main purpose of it is to re-establish caliphate. Now, these people, I mean, it is not hard Muslims and moderate Muslims. It's nothing to do with hard and Muslim, because if you are, I mean, very religious, you can pray 10 times instead of 5. You can wear whatever you want. You can eat or abstain from eating what you want. This is your personal thing. But these people regard Islam as a state without a political...
It's not religious state, it's a political state,
yeah,
that's what you mean.
It is no longer to pray and to confess Allah as one, and to fast and to make the rituals to be a Muslim. For them, they introduce something called jihad. Jihad means fighting the enemies of Islam. So the main purpose of Muslim Brotherhood was to re-establish the caliphate, the Islamic state. Not only that, but the next step in their dreams is, once the state is re-established, they will conquer the rest of the world in the name of God. And this is what belief. They carried on.
But why do you think, your opinion? Why?
This is their belief. Some people believe in that.
Power?
And they say now they want to establish a political, the Sharia law. Sharia law, as they talk about it, is not the law of the Quran, because as we know, the Quran doesn't talk too much about different laws. It's only
Yes,
two or
there's
three.
not much
Yeah,
information.
but they talk about the laws of the caliphate, of the Islamic caliphate, Islamic state. They want to re-establish the state. So they no longer, I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood did not regard themselves first as Egyptians first of all. They regard themselves as Muslims. So there's no borders for them. The national borders is wrong, and they have to reunify. And it is these people really who, I mean, from because they failed to establish this state, political state, through, I mean, democratic means, by convincing the majority of people to do that. They started, I mean, out of these groups was born different groups like Al-Qaeda, like Daesh, like all the political, I mean, these, I mean, groups which is fighting all over in the name of Islam came out of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah, they want, it is not Islam for them as so they not only regard non-Muslims as non-believers, they also regard Muslims who do not accept the Islamic State as non-believers, and they have to be killed. They have to be killed. So this is the problem we are facing now, and in fact, because most, even Al-Azhar, the major university of I mean, because Al-Azhar in the program, teaching program, they have all the views of different scholars through over the history of Islam, and obviously these views was concerned with the state. You see, we no longer have the state, and some of them always, I mean, so the Al-Azhar University now, I mean, there's no, I mean, all the what the Al-Qaeda says, Al-Daesh says, are taught nowadays in Al-Azhar University. But they regard them as a minority, they regard them as not moderate. Nevertheless, they teach young students to kill non-believers and so on. This is a serious of the situation, because in fact we didn't have in the Islamic world what happened in the Western world with the Protestant movement and the new political, I mean, French Revolution and separation in the state from the church. This situation has not taken place. Maybe now with Sisi in Egypt and Saudi Arabia is trying to separate a little bit, I mean, to weaken the power of the religious, I mean, establishment on political matters. This is just starting, but it will take time. Re-educate people and make them believe that Islam is just a religion like any other religion. Is it not? You don't have to fight. You don't have to kill other people. I mean, to defend whether they believe or not. It is up to them. Each one has to have their own belief.
They are growing, these type of Muslims.
They have been growing, but I think now with the destruction, with the defeat of the caliphate established by Baghdadi in Syria, Lebanon, and Syria and Iraq, they have no. I mean, this is the turning point. This is from now on. Obviously, they will be defeated everywhere. However, their ideas still live, not only in the Arab countries, but migrate also into Western countries, because Western countries, for humanitarian reasons, accept these people as immigrants and so on. But to tell you the truth, the danger comes with the same situation, because these people come with their own beliefs. And unless they are unless you accept if you live in Europe, you have to be European. You have to believe in the culture and values of Europe. Otherwise, you are. But these people, no, they hope in the future. In fact, even Turkey now is working on that. They hope that with more Muslim immigrants coming to Europe, then this is the new way of Islamic invasion of Europe. That eventually they start with saying we need help, and then eventually we need our rights, and then eventually we need to control. This is a real danger in the long run. This situation, what I have spoken about, deals with the caliphate, Muslim Islamic caliphate and state, and political Islam, which is mainly to do with the Sunni part of Islam, because Islamic people who believe in Islam are divided into two main major sections.
Yes.
Sunnis, which is Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and so on, and Shia, which is in Iraq and majority of the Iraqis, and Iran, and some in Afghanistan and these areas. The Sunnis, we have spoken now about political Islam and what it has come to. About the Shia, it is another even more serious danger, which is developing now, and we will talk about that
in the next part.
Next part.
But before we finish, I would like to know, because you said the Sharia is Islam, and do they write the Sharia in a book or something, like to follow that book, like they're making their new Quran? You think?
No, Sharia is of the state. Is different views of different scholars all over the time, and rules that have been taken by the judges and by the rulers. Now, when the Ottomans came, they put that they canonized that. They put it in one book. So it is all ancient things. All these
they keep following that.
Yeah. So
that book,
they keep following this book.
And they don't
Obviously,
this
book have different views. The different scholars have different views. Some moderate, some not moderate. But these all are kept and taught to new generations. Some of it is really doesn't work with our time at all, and some of it is dangerous. However, sadly enough, it is still exists, and it is still taught to young people until this moment.
So in the next part we will be talking about the Shia's Islam.
The Shia and what do they represent, and what are they looking
Sharia
for
as well, and what
because it is these people who are
before is totally different.
It's totally different, yes, because they are waiting for some hidden imam, like the Western Christians are waiting for the Christ to return at the end of days, and maybe the Jews waiting for the Messiah to come. The Shia are waiting for somebody. They say it's the hidden imam. It existed and was hidden and still hidden, to reappear at a certain moment for a conflict with the other powers. We will talk about that next time.
In the next part. Thank you very much, Mr. Osman, and see you, and we will talk about it in the next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Baba.